Good morning or afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Learning Bar, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. My name is Joel Henderson, and I'm a research associate here at the Learning Bar. And we are so excited you could join us today. But before we begin, the Learning Bar would like to acknowledge the traditional ancestral territory of the First Peoples in our respective locations on which we're learning, working, and gathering today. We pay our respects to the members, past and present, with honor and gratitude as they have stewarded the land throughout the generations. And I'm confident that we will continue to work together in the spirit of truth and reconciliation. And now I'd like to pass things over to the founder and president of the Learning Bar, Dr. Doug Wilms, who will introduce today's special guest. Doug?
Thank you, Joel. And I'm very pleased to um, introduce Lyn Sharratt. I've known Lyn, I don't know, I don't want to give away our age, but I've known her for a long time. I've known her professionally from her work that even preceded the Clarity Learning Suite and have been following her career. She's a celebrated author of many books, some with Michael Fullan, really well known, and has been in kind of in the same areas as the Learning Bar in Canada and Australia. Very strong presence in Australia with a lot of people really engaging with their learning suite. And the real test is she making a difference in schools? And she certainly is, and you'll see that more today. So welcome, Lyn. Thanks for attending the webinar.
Thanks so much, Doug. We have known each other and certainly worked alongside with the same perceptions around system and school improvement for many, many years, enjoyable years. I'd like to pay my respects to our elders, past, present, and emerging, on the lands where I live on beautiful Blue Lake Huron here in Ontario, Canada. And we have responsibility for these shores and waterways with our elders, past, present, and future, in the Chippewa band of Kettle and Stony Point. So welcome. It's a beautiful day today, and I'm looking forward to all of us learning from each other. That's what it's all about. I work with Aspect Education, a fabulous organization that supports students with autism across Australian schools. And this is their inclusion statement. And I ask you to read it. I'm not going to read it to you, but we want everyone here in this session to feel welcome and comfortable in learning alongside us. I always start our professional learning sessions with the minds on, and I'm going to share with you, as I did last time, the structure that I think that we should really engage in when we're bringing people together for professional learning. So this is the minds on. I'll have you take a look at the 4 points that I'd like to achieve today, along with my Learning Bar partners. So it's really important in this minds on to look at those verbs, those gerunds, and think about your present position as a leader. And I always say everyone's a leader in a school system, in a school. And I want you to take away how you engage with our focus for today's session. As well as minds on, I like to have operating norms, how we're going to treat each other in this session. To me, co-developing operating norms are really important in professional learning sessions. They develop that culture of trust. And when things aren't going as we intended, we go back to the operating norms. How are we doing in being a critical friend to another, or I like the words actually, knowledgeable other to each other? And I'm always asking, who's your knowledgeable other that you walk alongside to maybe push, pull, nudge, or you're a knowledgeable other to a group of teachers or leaders in your system. So it's important to always establish in professional learning sessions how we're going to treat each other. That's developing that really important culture of trust. So we've got a minds on. What's the focus for the session? We have operating norms, how we're going to treat each other. And then I always engage in the learning intention. what are we learning to do in this session? Take a look at the two that I've selected. And I want to model what we expect in classrooms. We expect learning intentions in classrooms directly from the curriculum expectations so that students really know what they're learning, what's expected of them. So we want you to stay connected to each other, and we use the chat bar to do that. I welcome you to put your comments in the chat bar, your questions you have for us. And also want you to know the research behind the work of clarity and why we put faces on the data. As well, in our classrooms, we not only want minds on operating norms, how we're going to treat each other as a class, what we're learning in this particular unit, for example, and then how we're going to ensure that students and learners are successful. So here are two success criteria that I've developed for today's session. But I really want us to know that developing or co-constructing, I say, success criteria with our learners in a unit of study really gives students a leg up, really is explicit and intentional around the instruction. So to me, it's that assessment capable student who is informed by our instructional practices. Today, I'd like you to make a 3-column chart on any paper you might have in front of me, pencil and paper, or on your tech equipment, your iPad or whatever. I want you to record what's my content, what I'm thinking about, and then what do you think about that? And then finally, are there any questions you're wondering about that you might raise in the chat bar, just in case there's something that's not clear to you? So at the end of our session, we'll come back to this, but I'd ask you to keep track of your thinking. What's the same or different in my jurisdiction from my research? Besides minds on operating norms, learning intentions, success criteria, and something like a thinking organizer, which is this, I always start every single professional learning or professional development meeting with data. And to me, the 14 parameters, which I spoke about last time, that's the structure that we can gather data within. And it's on page 11 if you have your clarity text with you. I'll try as often as possible to ensure that I've got the page numbers for your reference and your tabbing. But these are well researched. This is the work of Michael Fullan and I in putting faces on the data. And that was first published in 2012. And then again in 2022. And we haven't changed our mind about the categories. What we have done is probably wordsmithed some of the words that weren't quite clear enough. So I also believe in case studies. I love case studies because that's where actually my new text takes hold. The work of the 14 parameters is evidence-based, but what difference does it make to our students? Are our students growing and achieving? And we know that evidence is collected, and I've asked leaders in the jurisdictions I work to write case studies about the work to show that there's impact in using the 14 parameters as a gap analysis tool. So I'm going to ask you if you do have the case study from the Catholic Education Northern Territory jurisdiction that we've written together, the Learning Partnership, and I have, the Learning Bar and I have written this particular case study showing that using the data makes a huge difference in instructional practice. So I'm going to invite Ethan to take us through this case study. Welcome, Ethan.
Thanks, Lynn. I'm excited to unpack a bit more about the case study. So as Lynn mentioned, this is based on the excellent work that was done by the Catholic Education Northern Territory, school and system leaders there. We'll be referring to them as CENT as an abbreviation, in collaboration with Lynn, but also backed by some of the data from the Learning Bar. So in many systems, there's an abundance of strong, robust academic achievement data, professional observations, and that's really critical. It's really important data, but it doesn't always provide that picture of how students are actually experiencing school. And collecting student voice is a way to add that missing perspective. So in SENT specifically, they gathered student voice through the use of the OurSCHOOL, or Tell Them For Me as it's known in Australia, student surveys. And that helped to make visible how students were experiencing their learning environments, and including important dimensions such as student belonging, students' engagement, and the clarity of their learning experiences. So that data complemented those other sources of evidence and helped create this holistic picture of what's happening for the students. So we're going to talk a bit about how SENT did this specifically. So a little backstory on SENT. Oh, that's great. The next slide. So they're a system of about 18 schools. They're in a highly remote and diverse setting with a significant proportion of the students being Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders. And in 2023, they began using the Tell Them For Me student survey to gather student voice consistently across their system. That data helped give them that shared system-wide understanding of students' experiences and became one of the foundations of the improvement work that they were doing in collaboration with Lyn. So around that same time, in 2023, they launched the Learning Alliance with Dr. Sharratt, with Lyn, and that was grounded in the application of the 14 parameters of school improvement, the Clarity framework. And from the beginning, student engagement and empowerment was one of the central focuses of that alliance. And the TTFM data provided a clear way to understand the spirit of engagement across their schools. But one of the questions was how they make the interpretation and actioning of that data consistent across all of the schools. And that's where data walls came in. It's one of the key practices they put into place. So data walls, that's a structured way for teams to organize and discuss evidence about student learning and student progress. It creates this shared, visible way of focusing on students and their learning. TTFM was an important layer within those discussions because it made the students' experiences visible in a consistent way across both individuals, but also classrooms and groups. It made it possible to kind of visualize patterns across different groups of students, and also to notice disparities, any places where those experiences weren't consistent between groups. And looking at the data in that way allowed the teams to engage in rich conversations, standing around the data walls, and help them build this shared understanding of which groups of students would benefit from different types of supports and opportunities and why. And that really helped set the stage for more focused and coordinated system-level action. The next slide, please, Lyn. And that's kind of, this is where the idea of putting faces on the data comes to life. Student voices gathered through the survey, the data is reviewed, they identify patterns and areas of focus or further inquiry. But the important step from there is when the teams begin to identify some of these wonderings, then they want to ask themselves, who are the students behind these patterns specifically? What are they experiencing in the classrooms, and why are they experiencing that? And those are the types of conversations that took place at SENT. One of the key findings from their analysis and their discussions was that the students expressed that they were unclear about what they were learning, and they were also unclear about what success looked like in their learning experience. And that wasn't treated just as a statistic or, some a notable perception of students. It was understood as a real gap in the learning experience for students. And that provided some clarity about what to do next. And it led to direct system action. There was a greater focus employed to help make student visible learning, to make learning visible through setting clear learning intentions and establishing success criteria, co-constructing that with the students. And leaders spend more and more time actually walking the hall, walking into classrooms and speaking directly with students about what they were learning and why are they learning and how they know that they were progressing. And over time, this kind of soaked into the DNA of the system and just became a part of how the system functioned. And the collaborative review of TTFM perception data became this ongoing routine of asking what the patterns are and who the students are behind those patterns, and how we can best support them. So as that work developed, the impact became very, very visible. We'll speak a little bit about the impact on a few slides later on in the presentation. But from here, I'm going to turn it back to Lyn to talk about, in addition to some of the practices that I referenced from the 14-parameter framework, what are some of the other tools in the Clarity toolkit that can be employed?
Thanks so
back
much.
to you, Lyn.
Thanks, Ethan. And I have to say that the Tell Them From Me data guided my actions the entire almost 3 years that I worked in this remote region. And the excitement and the passion that came from the leaders and teachers who worked alongside me was really palpable. They could see the data and where there were some areas of need. But of course, they said, well, what are we going to do about that? And that's where, as Ethan said, the Clarity and Faces tools came into play, and that I'm going to share with you now. So we promised in the description of this session that I would speak to 4 different areas. One is equity. The second is data-driven decision-making. The third is amplifying student voice. And the final one that I've pulled together is, what does it take to lead this work? Why does leadership matter? And of course it does hugely, and all of us are leaders. So I want to start with the first segment, which is equity. And you can see that even though I presented on page 11 in Clarity, the 14 parameters are in a list. Michael Fullan said to me, don't ever leave them in a list because they're not a checklist. They all integrate and they work together. So Corwin, that was in the Faces book. So Corwin put them in this fabulous circle with all these wonderful colors. But what that shows is the interplay between and among all of the parameters. So when you're doing one of the parameters that you think might need more strength, you are also putting in place some of the other parameters. It's just inevitable. So we defined equity. Well, actually, Michael defined equity to a group of folks from the Netherlands that we were presenting to. And someone said, what's equity? And Michael said, no subgroup does actually said worse than another. So I've just flipped it to be a bit more positive. No subgroup does better than another. And we all know our subgroups and what we measure, and we really need to think about that. Are all subgroups growing and achieving at the same rate, at similar rates? And if not, what can we do to strengthen that? And how will we know? Well, again, we use data walls, looking at maybe a subgroup that you're concerned about, not maybe the whole system, but a subgroup. We use Venn diagrams. I'm in love with Venn diagrams. And we ensure that time for case management meetings follow our rich discussions, as Ethan said, at the data wall. So case management meetings are structured 15 minutes. And it's really important that we see putting faces on the data as having a data wall, visual faces that lead then to our wondering and our questions, which we can explore in those 15-minute case management meetings. So it's not just what is equity, but how do we know our subgroups, how our subgroups are doing, and what are the tools that we can work with alongside our teachers and leaders. So I want to go back to parameter 1. And here is parameter 1. It's number 1 for a reason. And it's number 1 because it's the hardest to do. We believe and have that shared understanding that all students can achieve high standards given the right time and support. We believe all teachers can teach to high standards given the right time and assistance. And then, of course, we're about high expectations. Are they high enough? Early and ongoing intervention needs to be in place in systems and schools. And finally, all of us as leaders, as teachers, as students can articulate why we're doing what we're doing and how we lead, teach, and learn the way we do. So you can see how those four dimensions are so important to this work. This is about gathering that culture of trust to have those open conversations using the tools that we have both in the learning bar and in Clarity and Faces. So I urge you to think about that parameter one and go back to it many, many times, different ways, different processes, because this is the why of system and school improvement. Why are we doing this tough work? It's because it's an equity issue for us. It's about all students, all teachers, all leaders. And one of the things that I look at in returning to the why of parameter number one is the processes that we can use. And here's one of our teachers and also assistant principal. She has a dual role. Her name is Emma, and I'm not going to play it all because I get these amazing videos and they're very long, but I just want you to hear how her principal said we need to unpack the four dimensions of parameter one. So let's have a listen to Emma just for a moment. Make some notes as you hear what she says about the process.
We started our journey with the 14 parameters in September 2018. It impacted us in so many ways, and so I'll talk to you this morning about the impacts it's had on our school. We also visited other schools to look at the 14 parameters in action so we could make more sense of what this looks like in a school context. To embed the 14 parameters into our school systems, it was crucial that our work around parameter one was thorough. So we spent so much time as an executive about what this shared belief and understanding was. So one of our first executive meetings, our principal, Angela, put this big sheet of butcher's paper in front of us and just said, well, what does it look like, sound like, feel like? And so we all just sat there and scratched our heads at first, and it took us a few executive meetings to actually brainstorm, well, hang on, what are we going to put on this Y chart? But we did. We came up with words that we thought it should look like, sound like, and feel like. And then we took it to the staff room and shared it with the staff because we wanted to be really clear in our communication and share with staff, well, this is what we think, but what do you think? Because we want to do this together, and it comes back to that accountability and getting buy-in from everyone in our staff.
So I'm going to just share that with Emma because it's very important for us to realize that those four dimensions in parameter one are the foundational work of system and school improvement. So I'm in South Australia here in Adelaide, and this is the Y chart activity that they've done. What do each of those key dimensions look like, sound like, and feel like in parameter one? So the Y chart is only one way of unpacking parameter one. We need lots of different processes to come back to parameter one and ask ourselves, do we really have high enough expectations? Do we really believe all students can learn? Do we really believe all teachers can teach? And if we don't, what do we need to do to bolster that belief? So to me, when we think about equity, we think about that parameter one. And Michael and I tried several different words. We talked about every student can learn, each student can learn, but we always came back to the word all, and we really mean all. So in thinking about our first priority in this session, it's to understand the definition of equity and also how we can unpack parameter one and what are the processes. The other bookend of the parameters is all of us have responsibility and accountability for all students. We all own all students learning. We all own all teachers learning. So that's another area. Those two bookends are places we can really unpack often. What do the processes look like that you can use to get at that responsibility and accountability as well? The second big idea that I promised we would talk about is data-driven decision making. And that word or that phrase has been around for a long time. But I think the word data really scares people. Oh my goodness. And we think about percentages and statistical analysis. And so my premise is that we need to keep it short, sharp, and shiny. We need to keep it simple for our teachers and leaders to explore. So in chapter 7 of Clarity, I've really shown the four matrix, the matrix, the four square, I call it. And I ask folks to fold it into four, their chart papers, and at the top put in what's a surprise, what's noteworthy, what's troublesome, and what's a question when you look at your data. And I want to keep the data very simple. So looking at maybe 1 year level, one classroom, one piece of data just to get started. And with that simple matrix in mind, the conversations are fabulous. And it takes away the worry of the term data analysis. Just a simple foursquare. And of course, what's troublesome might be then what you zero in on your data wall. And the question or the questions that groups come forward with can be your collaborative inquiry questions. That's simple. We want to keep it simple, focused, and stress-free for our participants looking into classroom data, school data, and system data. The other thing we can use to ensure we're really operating with data-driven decision-making is looking at the 14 parameters. So this is one of the jurisdictions, and this is actually a school I was walking and talking in, and each pair of teachers took a parameter to unpack, and they unpacked them in two ways. What have we already achieved in this particular parameter, and what's developing? And that's really important to me because we are not asking, I'm not asking anyone to throw everything out they've already done in this work. It's what are we already doing? We're not getting rid of anything. We're refining what we're doing. And then what might we think about that we need to know about this particular parameter? And so we can use the 14 parameters as a gap analysis tool, which is what are we successful in and what do we need to do next? So we don't use negative conversation. We never say, what are we not working well in? It's what do we need to do next? What's our next best learning move, given the tools that we've used to unpack our data? So to me, that's definitely data-driven decision making. I mentioned I love Venn diagrams. I really do. This is a cohort of Year 9 students. And you can see that wonderful Venn diagram. Here are the students on the right, on the left, who are on track. And now it is Year 9 English. So we've really defined the area of need. Given the NAPLAN data that all schools receive across Australia, for example, and which students are at risk, and they're on the right, and they're already receiving support, so resources for the at-risk. And then who are we concerned about that don't have those resources? What are we wondering about? And these are the students who will come to a case management meeting. Do the students come to the case management meeting? No. Do parents come to the case management meeting? No. It's a private space where teachers and leaders look at a piece of student work and decide what's working well with this student and what do we need to do more of. And are there any new instructional strategies that around the table we can use to support this particular student? And what's interesting about that is one student may represent 2 or 3 other students in that group that are concerned. So Venn diagrams, I love them. And we can't say we're doing parameter number 6, putting faces on the data, if the data walls aren't followed by these case management meetings. 15 minutes, a student of wonder comes. And the teacher presents that student of wonder through the piece of student work. And the folks assembled around the table say, what have you already tried? Because that's honoring what the teacher has tried. And then what are some ideas around the table that might work with this student? Knowing that it's a piece of student work that represents the student. It's a 15-minute meeting. And so again, you need to be short, sharp, and shiny. And I've included in Clarity some templates to make sure we stay on track for 15 minutes. So there are web resources in Clarity that you can find the templates for not only the meeting, but also the follow-up meeting 3 weeks later. Very important. We're just not going to have a meeting and then say, well, there you go, teacher. We've given you great suggestions. Now, way you go. No, we never leave a student without coming back to ensure that at least one of the strategies that the teacher has selected has worked for that student. We never give up on a student, but if it's really a tough one to unpack, we might take a break and take a higher student, maybe also who also is on the data wall that we could learn from, and then come back to that student. We never, ever give up on any students. So I'm always saying data today is instruction tomorrow. Excuse me. However, I've changed my tune. Data today is instruction the very next minute. So that's why we need to have that tangible assessment data to inform our instructional practices. So again, we're going to hear from Erica, one of my teachers here in Ontario, and how she uses the Venn diagram. I'll only play the part that she talks about first, her year 6-7 class, which is an interesting split, not an easy one at times. And she's teaching the class in a unit on similes and metaphor. And you can see around her are lots of anchor charts to visuals to help the students. So you'll see evidence of her third teacher, specifically designed with these students in mind. So they've been working on it. And I've been in Erica's classroom 8 times. So I feel confident now in asking her, what do you think about when you're planning with your students in mind? And this, I really want you to note what Erica says. Excuse me. And what tool Erica uses to really gather formative assessment data. Have a listen and make some notes. Love you to share your comments in the chat bar. So this is Erica.
This lesson for simile and metaphor was planned with the gradual release of responsibility always in mind. So I wanted to ensure that I had all of those components where there was explicit teaching. Well, first a mental set where that engaged students, and I also tried to build in some concept attainment with the 4 corners, where they kind of got the idea of comparing 2 things that they were with a common trait. So we did the concept attainment, then moved on towards the explicit teaching, right, the input. After that, having them move into group work, which is a really crucial part of the lesson for me, because in the class, the particular group of learners that I have, they like to share ideas and talk. So there's always accountable talk built in throughout the lesson, whether it's a think, pair, share, discuss with an ensemble partner, or even just round robin in a group. I find that we need to talk in order to be able to generate those good ideas. So it can't always be silent. After the group component, independent practice, where I really get a chance to walk around and see if they have an understanding on their own. To help me kind of capture those things, I often use this tool, a Venn diagram, where the first part shows who really knows the concept and can explain it independently. This middle group where they kind of get it, but they might need some more explanation. And then finally, a couple or a few group students who might need some extra prompting or support that I would then pull to the guided table for some guided practice and prompting.
So I'm going to stop there. And you saw the tool she used. No wonder I'm in love with Venn diagrams. This is an ongoing formative assessment tool. And I teach at the university. I use it at the university. This isn't just an elementary school, or you would say primary school tool. This is for all learners. How are we going to capture what students know? And what I appreciate about Erica's planning is she uses the gradual release of responsibility, including modeling, sharing, guiding. So she didn't say guided reading table, she said guided table, where she would take a student or two who are not getting the concept. Independent practice, we heard that. And we also heard application, the fifth stage of gradual release, which we often miss, which is, do they understand it well enough that they can teach someone else what they're learning? So that application to a new genre, a new subject area is a missing piece, I believe, in the gradual release, and using gradual release to plan our units of study, for example. But I want you to see how Erica uses that tool, and she uses then the data she collects in that tool for her ongoing conversations and assessment of students. So she has files for each of the units, and makes notes about how the Venn diagram has helped her ensure that students are meeting the co-constructed success criteria, which is so important. So this is writing. And again, it's really interesting. This isn't just 3 spaces. This is like 5 spaces. And I never actually thought about this. But here I'm working in Victoria, Australia. And the expectations or the success criteria are below students working at the year 5, students working at year 6, and students who are above level, year 7. So it's very helpful and visual to see the I can statements underneath each of those parts of the Venn diagram. Another Venn diagram, and again, 5 spaces instead of 3, but using reading assessment to look at the levels. Far below, below, at level, just above, and well above are something that these teachers in their key stages are using together. And I love the use of hula hoops. How visual is that? But again, the question becomes, how do we get the students well below to jump into the next hoop? How do we get the students at level to stretch above and well above? So it becomes, this is the assessment. What are the questions we're asking ourselves now in terms of data-driven decision-making around instructional practice in every classroom? Oh, come on. There we are. So data-driven decision-making leads me to the third big idea in our session today, and that is, how do we amplify student voice and hear student voice in the classroom? And I've chosen to talk to you about bump it up walls. We used to call them performance walls, but I think that's pretty boring. And I love the term bump it up walls. So when I'm working in professional learning sessions, I have the district I'm working in select 4 samples. Sometimes I use 7 samples of writing at a particular year level, a particular subject area. It doesn't have to be English. And then I have groups of teachers order those samples given the success criteria. So they have to check out the success criteria in the curriculum expectations. You don't have to mysteriously wonder where they are. They're in every curriculum document I've ever looked at. And then asking the teachers not only to order them, but put these success criteria below each of the writing samples, and use a post-it then to determine, how does the student get from this level to this level? And that's the conversation that's so important. What are the instructional strategies that we share with students to become the next level student? So here's some examples of bump it up walls. This was my very favorite, year 4. And unfortunately, in Clarity, I didn't have the rights to use the McDonald's hamburgers. So I couldn't put this one in Clarity, but I did make up one on my own, and it is in Clarity. And I believe that it's probably in chapter 5. I'm not really sure. But I did talk about assessment that informs instruction. So either in chapter 4 or 5, you'll see bump it up walls. What's really important to me when I look at this bump it up wall is that it's really a learning wall for not only students, but the teachers. So there's some exemplars below each of the levels. And it becomes a conversation with students about bring your writing up to me at the wall. Where do you think you are on this progression? And then if you're a level 3, how are we going to get to level 4? Let's take a look at the I can statements. What do you need to do in your writing to make it a level 4? So to me, bump it up walls are about hearing students talk about their own learning, their own work at the wall with the teacher or with a peer. When we do peer and self-assessment, the wall becomes so important, critically important to hear how students self-assess where they are, how they've checked out the success criteria, and how they talk with each other about their next steps. So this is definitely in Clarity. And I've worked with Elaine Cruz, who's a teacher in the Western Prairie provinces in Canada, who does this yearly with her students. And she keeps that writing continuum, she calls it, up all year long. And when all of the students have accomplished the first level, she takes that down and they add to the level at the other end. So it's a wonderful way of hearing student voices talk about their own learning. Self-assessment, I think, is the ultimate of amplifying student voice. And self-assessment is on page 124 in Clarity. And here's a student talking to me about the levels in their room. So the teachers talk to them about moving from dependent learners to independent learners, so gradual release. And she's developed with the students 4 levels in their classroom. So the level with the little smiley face with the sunglasses, I need some help. The next level, I need some help, but not a lot of help. The third level, I can do this by myself. And the fourth level, I can teach someone else. So that's peer and self-assessment tool in terms of exploring where students place themselves is really important. So this fellow explained that he was on the third level. I can do this work in both in writing and in math. I can do this without any teacher direction, but I'm working towards teaching someone else, which is the highest level. So you can see how the teachers would have co-constructed this together. And finally, in thinking about student voice, how well do we know our students? I did download this from the internet, but I would like you to write in the chat bar how you amplify the voices of your students, your teachers, and leaders in your care. So hopefully you can do 2 things at once. Put a comment and also please sign into the chat bar where you're from and talk about how you ensure student voice in your classrooms. And as we listen to this particular teacher, I won't go through all of it. She has a lot of students in her room, but take a listen and think about how this resonates for you and what you can reflect on in this video.
Board. Question. Asa. I have a question. Van. Say it again. Oliver. Did I go to the bathroom? Allie. Danny.
I have a question.
Declan.
I have a question.
Say it again.
I have a question.
Nico. Nicholas.
Okay, we're going to stop there because I think she has about 30 students in her classroom. She knew every one of those voices. What a great tool to use to really ensure we're putting faces on our data. We know our students really well. And I often use this tool, 3-column chart. Who are the students in your class, or who are the teachers in your care? And in the second column, write 10 things you know about each teacher. Write 10 things you know about each leader. Write 10 things you know about each student. And then in the last column, do those students or leaders know that you know those 10 things about them? So that's just a little quick and easy way to think about your work and putting faces on your learners' data and how well you know each one of the students, teachers, and leaders in your care. Now, this leads me to think about our fourth dimension, which is, for me, everything. Leadership matters. And when I say everyone's a leader, I really mean that. Everyone, whether you're a leader in your classroom, in your network, in your key stage, in your school, in your system, everyone is a leader. And I believe that leaders can control the conditions for success for all learners. And how do we do that? Well, I turn to Roland Barthes' research, 2005. So we've been working on this a long time, but I like what he says. He says, we know that leaders control the conditions for success when there's always talk about practice. And we change the conversations maybe in staff rooms, from the footy game to the instructional practices we're trying. When we give teachers time to share their craft knowledge, we really control the conditions for success. And I love that concept. Teachers all have craft knowledge. Roland Barthes says, when we walk and talk in classrooms, we know where the practices that are working are occurring, and we take other teachers there to have a look. And finally, he says, when you cheer for the success of one another, that is, when you care for the school down the road as much as you care for your own, then you are controlling the conditions for success. And look at the right-hand side of the screen. None of these things matter if those 4 check marks aren't in place. So for me, leadership matters at every single level. When we walk in classrooms, we're looking for that third teacher, that culture of learning in our school, not just in classrooms, but in hallways, out in the properties we have. So leaders look for the culture of learning, the third teacher in classrooms. First teacher, parents. Second teacher, teacher in classrooms. Third teachers, the learning spaces, the walls. Co-constructed. Students can see themselves on the wall. When we think about that other bookend, that parameter 14, we control the conditions for success. We know what is high impact strategy in every classroom. We do learning walks and talks in a focused way in our schools, in our system. We know that data walls lead to case management meeting. And finally, we're always celebrating small wins. That's the definition of that parameter 14, shared responsibility and accountability for all learners. Now, I want to introduce you to some work I've done in Wales. This is Jennifer Allison. She's head of English in a secondary school in North Wales. And I'm not sure that you'll understand exactly what Jennifer is saying, but I want you to experience her enthusiasm. It was so contagious. Have a listen just to a little bit of this.
I'm Jennifer Ellison. I'm the head of English in New So we write and the data walls have really transformed and how we do us. So we do deployment with data walls. We've got one for year 10 and one for year 11. And we start off with our data and we colour code the pupils. Yeah. So we've got red, yellow, and green. So we have an initial ranking based on the data. Then about one.
And what I want you to take away from that is she was so
I'm Jennifer Ellison.
Jennifer, she was so excited about that she's absolutely contagious. So when I was in North Wales working, she was following, I knew there was someone behind me. She was following along with her data wall under her arm. So data walls don't have to be on walls. They can be transportable as well. She carried that data wall around and she said it transformed our whole department. And now the science department is adopting it and the French department as well. So I say that leaders need to be passionate and compassionate and bring people along with them. I want to share with you the 5 questions as a tool for you to use in knowing if your leadership is making an impact. And this is Arabella, year 6 student, talking about her work and answering the 5 questions. Have a listen. Make some comments in the chat bar.
Can you tell me what you're writing about?
I'm writing an imagined text.
And I notice when I'm looking at your text that you've got color coding in there that's been highlighted. Can you tell me about that?
The teacher gave us a learning intention. We are learning to develop a character within an imaginative text so that we trigger an emotional response from our audience. So then the class developed a success criteria and I highlighted the success criteria and matched it with my writing so it's color coded and I know which bits I've done in the success criteria.
What happens, Arabella, if you have missed something from your success criteria?
If I've missed something, I look at my success criteria and I find what I haven't done and I go up and look at the writing that is not highlighted and recraft.
Now, how do you know when you've been successful in your writing?
I know when I'm successful when I've included everything from my success criteria.
Thank you, Arabella.
I love that because she is so descriptive with those questions. She really understands what she's learning and how she can improve. So to me, it's important that teachers see what this work looks like in action. And as Emmerling says, that if teachers don't see what you're talking about in your professional learning sessions, they revert to the way they've always taught, or he says, worse yet, the way they were taught. So I say, as leaders, we need to be doing learning walks and talks. We need to be asking students those 5 questions to give us data around how our students are understanding a unit of study and how they know how to improve. I suggest that we start with ghost walks, where when students are not in school, we do a data collection before a staff meeting, walk in pairs to take a look at where are the explicit assessment and instructional strategies on the walls in our classroom. And of course, it's important to leave warm, fuzzy notes about being positive about what we see in classrooms. But these 5 questions relate to my assessment waterfall chart. So if students can answer these questions, they're assessment capable, which is huge. And of course, Heidi gives it a huge effect size to be students being assessment capable. But there they are. And when you kneel down beside someone to ask the questions and the teacher is not directly teaching, you'll know whether the learning is clear for the students. And do they know that descriptive feedback? Do they know how to improve? And here's the waterfall chart that marries the questions for students, and the dimensions in the middle there of the waterfall chart. Assessment improves instruction, and it has to be the very next minute. We can't even wait a day. So just in conclusion, I would say that equity and excellence are all of the parameters, but there are some non-negotiables, which are foundational. And that would be what I've talked about today. Parameter 1 and parameter 14, the bookends. And then, of course, putting faces on that data and knowing what professional learning is needed. I always talk about alignment is key. So teachers don't say, oh, well, you know, we're doing this other work, but then we do the Sharratt work on Fridays. No, it's not the Sharratt work. It's our forever work, and it needs to be integrated into the learning that you're already doing. So I see government expectations, teacher standards as the what we're doing, and the clarity and faces tools as how are we going to do this? Very structured, thoughtful approach. And you'll find all of these in the Clarity Learning Suite, both the full suite, and then we've developed some essentials, which are the specifics around my research that really are 55-minute sessions because we know how precious the learning time is. So I want to circle back around to Ethan, who will just spend a couple of minutes. Not only has Ethan unpacked the SENT case study, which you can certainly receive if you haven't got it, but he is adding further impact of this clarity work. So over to you, Ethan.
Yeah, thanks. And it's always good to take a moment and reflect and celebrate the success of a positive outcome. And there was an extremely positive outcome in the case of SENT. We'd actually finished the first draft of the case study and we're about to send it out to people. And we received a pretty excited email from the director of SENT, Paul Greaves, saying that the system had just been recognized by the National Catholic Education Commission as an exemplar system in the country. And to date, they've been the first jurisdiction in Catholic education to achieve a 10% increase in proficient students in tested areas. So that's a real, it's a real evidence of and a testament to the hard work and thoughtful, structured work that is done by the leaders, the system leaders, the school leaders, the teachers, and the students of SENT, and all kind of guided by the how of that clarity framework. So I think that's a real cause for celebration.
Thank you, Ethan. And of course, it all started with the Tell Them From Me data, and from there, we looked at the clarity learning tools that every school needed to put in place. So for me, everyone's a leader, leading yourself first, leading others next, but it's the part in the middle, which is just listed on the left of the screen. It's the humanity of leadership that makes all of this work. It's knowing how to build trust and collaborative practices with your community. So I invite you now to add anything in the chat bar or add anything in as Doug reflects on our time together today. Doug?
Yeah, we don't have too many minutes left, but when I think about data-driven decision making, as you said, the term has been around a long time. Just imagine, well, whether if you're a teacher or a principal or a superintendent or whatever your role may be, or maybe not in the system, but imagine for a minute that you're a principal, and data-driven decision making isn't a linear process. Oh, we collect the data, and this says this, and therefore we're going to make this decision. It doesn't work like that at all. Every one of you would have your own particular frame, which your own context, as it were, that has a culture to it, a cultural context, a social context, an economic context, hugely important right now, and there's a political context. And I think of data-driven decision-making as this interplay between your working knowledge and your specific knowledge. So your working knowledge, let's say it's affected by various facts, your experience as a principal, no shortage of opinions from your friends and from parents, and your own long-standing attitudes and values. That's your working knowledge. And that's very hard to change, actually. It can be quite ingrained. I have a view about ability grouping. We should be doing ability grouping, or we should not be doing ability. But then you have your specific knowledge, which is shaped by your training. It's researched by kinds of research that I've been doing for umpteen years. And then also by local data. And when that specific knowledge can chip away or influence that working knowledge, that's when you make different kinds of decisions. And you make hundreds of decisions every day, but say big decisions. And this is what Clarity Suite does so well, is it's bringing very practical tools to bring data that is shared, and certainly when it's shared amongst colleagues, then it becomes more powerful as an effect on shaping working knowledge. Things like the principal's walkabout, the school, very powerful. Goes into one classroom, they're doing ability grouping, going in another one, they're not. And saying, well, actually, maybe this can work that way. That's the beauty, I think, of the Clarity data. And I think the Tell Them From Me data sits somewhere between those research studies and the kinds of very on-the-ground practical things that Lyn does. It influences our specific knowledge and then therefore affects our working knowledge. And therefore fits into that social, cultural, economic, political context.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Doug, for that summary. I like that thinking, because we all have mindsets, and what can influence those mindsets in positive ways. In every one of our professional learning sessions, I return to the success criteria, and we think about, were we successful in this particular session? Can you now walk away articulating the why of the FACES, Clarity, and my new work, Precision in Practice? And can you put some helpful comments in the chat bar that will support other colleagues from around the world who are learning today? So I want us to think about, in our professional learning sessions, do we always return to the success criteria and check out what we're walking away with? So I'd like to end the presentation today with a very short clip. And while you're viewing it, would like you to leave a comment in the chat bar before you leave the session. Have a look. This is Precision in Practice. Don't close your eyes, you'll miss it. There we are. Think about precision in practice. There, precision. And I invite everyone who would like that video. It's called Water Slide on YouTube. But to me, it really is about that precision in practice in our work. So thank you so much for being with us today, the Learning Bar and my work around Clarity. Over to you, Joel.
Yes, Lyn, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. Though we don't have time for the Q&A portion, for those interested in learning more, we will be following up with some handy links and resources to all registered participants. And also on behalf of Lyn and the Learning Bar, we want to just say thank you for joining us here today. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Joel. And will we also receive the chat bar so we can take a look at it?
Yes, we can provide that information as well.
Excellent. Thanks, folks. Loved being with you. And thanks to the Learning Bar for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks,
Thank
Ethan.
you.
Thanks, Joel.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Melissa.